The first question is, what is my content? And this is really important to me because I use the chronology of American history in order to help guide my course. And we go based on timelines and time periods to help students remember that information. So the next thing I want to do is think through the objective of what the students are going to be doing with that content. Now, if you are in a different type of course, you might look at a specific skill instead of looking at the content first. The third question, what will students do during the lesson, is really sort of about that lesson planning technique. Once you have an outline for your lesson of what you want students to do and how they're going to demonstrate mastery, it'll be much easier for you to look at where can you implement technology. And we've sort of divided that into a few specific categories. In looking at the implementation areas of technology, you can use technology in helping to plan the lesson, but you probably do that on a regular basis. Maybe you use Teachers Pay Teachers or Teachers Notebooks or any sort of website where you can go and get lesson plans on certain contents. So we're not going to address that for today because with this model, questions 1, 2, and 3 should have been completed by now, so the planning stage would have happened in the past. Instead, you're going to look at how can I use technology when I'm delivering my instruction, when my students are exploring or developing their content, or when I'm assessing the mastery that students have obtained during my lesson. So question 3 is really important because once you have that outline, you can divide your lesson into delivering, exploring or developing, and then assessing, and from there determine which technology to use. That brings us to question 4 and 5 and where our model begins. What one technology element best supports my outline? And how do I make it happen? These two questions are going to be important as you work to start with technology, and we intentionally focus on one piece because when you're comfortable with one thing, then it's okay to move on to something else because us as the instructor, we have to think about our comfort level with the technology, but we also have to think about the technology comfort level of our students. So what are those skills they already have? And we also have to think about how many classes they have. If they have 4 classes a day and every teacher is using a different piece of technology, the students are having to remember the skills associated with 4 separate technologies as well as the skills and the content of the lesson, and we really don't want to overwhelm them. So instead, try to focus on introducing one type of technology at a time. When the students have demonstrated mastery of that technology piece, then you can build in several different types throughout the different parts of your lesson. In looking at how do I make it happen, you're looking at what do I have to do in order to implement this technology in a manner that avoids edutainment and allows for academic growth. What I've done here is simply created a chart with my questions on one side and the process that I go through on the other. And what I'm going to do is just kind of model through my thinking process with a lesson that I have coming up. My students are going to do this lesson this week. And I want to kind of go through these steps so we can see how I decide what technology I'm going to use and then to create my action plan to implement that. I will occasionally sort of stop and interrupt my thinking model so that I can kind of go through the important parts of these questions. So the first question is, what is my content? I'm using the chronology to help organize the course, so the question is, what comes next? For this lesson, the Declaration of Independence is the next text that the students are going to be looking at. And once I've thought about my content, I need to think about what I want my students to do with this text. And I've taught this text in the past, and I sort of know what skills and standards and objectives fit in. But I want to kind of break it down into student-friendly terms and think, what is that thing, that skill that the students are going to do? I always want my students to think about the historical setting, so of course they're going to have to describe the historical setting, and I want them to explain the need for separation. They're going to be taking the AP exam. This course is also paired with AP US History, so we kind of get to bring that piece in there together. Also, they need to be able to break down the complex structure to identify the meaning and the rhetorical appeals. Now, the rhetorical appeals, they've done that in the past, so I don't anticipate that taking too much. But the new thing is the rhetorical devices. I want them to recognize and analyze the effect of the rhetorical devices on the text. So let me just kind of step out for a second. Right now, I've really looked at my content and thought about what are the students going to do. And then I moved into that next piece of the standards and the objectives. And I've built in 3 different pieces. One of the things that we've really talked about with Common Core is that a lesson may take more than a day. We really want to look at how can we scaffold this learning, how can we chunk this learning, and see the students hit this higher level of understanding and analysis and application. So that's really kind of what I've done with my objective and my standard here. Stepping back into the model, the next thing I want to think about is what are the students going to do during the lesson? And I've taught this lesson a few times, and I know from just from my own experience that anytime the students read something, I want them to do something before they read, while they're reading, and after they're reading to really kind of help with that comprehension. But I also like what our literacy guru, Shannon Jackson, has really kind of brought in this idea that every time a student read, they should talk about it, and they should write about it. So I want to bring all of those elements into my lesson. So when I think about what the students are going to do, I'm putting all of that together. The first thing they're going to do is take notes on the historical background. We've skipped a couple hundred years here, and I want them to have that background of what's going on. Like, why do we need to have this separation? And I want to give them the opportunity to combine what they're learning in this class with what they're learning in AP US History. This isn't going to be a huge part. I only have 2 slides where I just want to make sure they kind of get it. And really, it's more questions on the slides, and I'm going to go through that with a discussion nature so the students can tell me what they learn, rather than just me telling them and then reproducing that information later. And next, they're going to read and annotate the text. I've sort of gotten them trained so that while they're annotating, they're looking at things that they understand and they don't understand. They're looking for vocabulary that they aren't sure about or don't know, and really trying to make connections and interact with the text during that time. I'm also going to ask them to try to label the appeals. This was that prior knowledge, so they should be able to do it easily. So once they've kind of gone through and they read, they understand what it's about, we'll probably have some sort of a first turn, last turn discussion, and then I want them to label the appeal and the way in which the audience would have responded to it. So I'm probably going to have them label 2 examples of each: ethos, logos, pathos, and then I want them to think about not just what is said, but why is it said this way, and how does it affect the message of the text. Finally, the students are going to need to label the rhetorical devices and the ways in which those are going to affect the audience as well. This is newer. The students haven't mastered the vocabulary. I know that it's expected that they come in kind of knowing this, but I can tell already from speaking with them through the semester that they haven't mastered terms like antithesis or even parallelism. So I'm really going to have to work on that vocabulary if I want them to be able to label those devices. My next question is looking at what technology element best supports my outline. So once I've kind of figured out what students are going to do during the lesson, I want to think about where can I use technology. I could use it in delivering the instruction. I could use it in the exploration and development of the content, or I could use it in the assessment piece. And I really want to think about where the students are likely to struggle and anticipate the difficulties they may have in order to help me to do this. I've already determined that students really struggle with the vocabulary, so I could use Memorize and set up a course where the students are going to practice the terms and what they are, what they mean, and I could even have some examples of them in there to help the students master that. That's sort of external to this lesson, though, and since that is something that is foundational and and it's prior knowledge, but they have to know what they are in order to find them and analyze them in the text. They may need some additional time with the guided questions, so I could provide a video model. When I think about what's going to best support the students, they technically could do the vocabulary from their notes, even though I know the memorize would be more interactive for them and probably more engaging and more motivating to work with. But I know that they're going to need that model. And I know that they're going to have to do some of this as homework outside of class. And so I think the technology element that's going to best support my outline is going to be in the delivery of the model. So I think I'm going to have to look at how I can make that happen. There are many techniques for filming lessons, but I think I'm going to fall back on my favorite and the easiest one to use. I am going to use Explain Everything to create a video model for the students. So how am I going to make this happen? Well, I'm going to start with my PowerPoint. PowerPoint's boring, and I know, but if I do the PowerPoint, I can make that engaging, and then I can build that into images that would be the screen for Explain Everything. Next, I'm going to kind of script it. I type my notes into the PowerPoint a lot, and I'm going to use those notes to help me remember what I need to say in my video model for my students. And next, I'm going to record it, and with recording it, I'm going to preview it, and then finally, I'm just going to post it to our class YouTube page. Once I have that posted, I can provide students with the link. They can do the video model during class with me there to help answer questions and to help them with a we do and a you do afterward. And then if they need the extra help, the students could access that model on their own outside of class as well.